Welcome to Polaris-Live, conversations on the U.S.-China relationship and its global impact as seen through the eyes of experts from around the world. This is your host, Sarwar Kashmeri, and I want to specially thank our viewers to this program as we continue our fifth year. This non-commercial user-supported channel is brought to you live in conjunction with the Foreign Policy Association of New York. Viewers may ask questions using the bar on the right-hand side of the screen. My guest today is Mr. ZHOU Bo. He's a senior fellow at the Center for International Security and Strategy at Tsinghua University and a retired colonel in the Chinese People's Liberation Army. For those who may not know it, the title of senior colonel in the PLA is equivalent to a brigadier general in Western militaries. He has published more than 180 English essays and opinion pieces in leading publications, including Foreign Affairs, Wall Street Journal. He appears in international media, including BBC, NBC, Deutsche Welle, and is a regular speaker at security conferences, which include the Shangri-La Dialogue in Singapore and the Munich Security Conference. His new book is Should the World Fear China? Oxford University Press. Welcome to Polaris-Live, Senior Colonel ZHOU Bo. Thank you for joining us at this late hour in Beijing.
Thank you, Sama, for having me here.
Now listen, you titled your recent book, Should the World Fear China? So, ZHOU Bo, why does the world fear China?
Well, I just raised this question because actually this is the question raised to me by the famous German magazine called Die Zeit. Yeah, this actually turned out to be the first question they asked me, Colonel, should the world fear China? So I do not mean that by raising this question, the world should fear China. The answer is no, but for a number of good reasons. China certainly now looks formidable. If one look at the recently concluded Tiananmen Parade, which showcased all the latest weapons, passing through Tiananmen Square. But right. I need to point out that this is showcasing China's military might. This is about our capability, which is strong indeed. But let me point out the fact that China has not entered into any wars after 1979. Yeah, so apart from a few minor skirmishes with the Vietnamese, for example. So we have maintained peace for over 4 decades. So this is a fact which tells that China's rise has been peaceful. And this is miraculous for any countries in human history. China has moved from a very backward, level to become the second largest economy in the world. So having military capabilities and not to use military capability, these are two different things.
Well, that makes certainly a lot of sense, but there are those, at least in America, who would say that the reason that there is much more action now is because China really was not able to flex its muscles. But as it is flexing its muscles, it's in a different situation. And so to them, you would say?
Well, I think if you just watch Tiananmen Square Parade, you could draw different conclusions. Depends on, who you are. For example, yes. Definitely this is a kind of show of muscles, but it is also an unprecedented effort in transparency, right? Yeah, because China actually would publish the white paper from time to time, but these white papers are not the big books, and they are sometimes considered a little bit abstract, yeah? So showing all these kind of weapons, which are those that are already deployed with the PLA, definitely tells PLA's strengths. But, the fact is, okay, let's compare PLA with the American military. How many wars the US military has fought after the ending of the Cold War, starting from the Gulf War, right? Yeah, Gulf War, Iraq War, Afghan War, in for example, in Kosovo, and so on and so forth. Yeah, almost endless. Yeah, until today. But what about PLA? As I said before, PLA has actually fought no war, and this kind of benefit, this kind of dividend, yeah, of peace actually has made China, yeah, to achieve what it is now, the second largest economy by GDP, and China is already the largest economy by PPP. It's interesting for me to think about China, even as a Chinese now, because in the past, yeah, there are some African countries describing China as a superpower. But this year, at the Shangri-La Dialogue, even the French president, yeah, Emmanuel Macron, coming from one of the permanent members of the UN Security Council, would describe China as a superpower. This is interesting.
Yes, that is indeed very interesting. You go to a lot of these very famous international conferences, the Munich Dialogue and the Shangri-La and so on. In America, the China, the relationship is referred to as strategic competition. How does China, what phrase does China use in these conferences, Bo, to describe the United States?
Well, initially, China called for cooperation because in Chinese culture, this kind of a description of a natural relationship as one of cooperation certainly makes people feeling more comfortable. Yeah, this is what competition just to make people feel tense, right? Yeah, so that is what we called for in the beginning. But since the U.S. would insist that this relationship is one of strategic competition, then China would have to take a deep breath, say, okay, come on, if this is what you want, then we must dare to fight. To dare to fight is official language that the Chinese government has used in its document, but it takes a long time for us to reach this point. But even if this kind of relationship is a mixture of competition and cooperation, but still there is a ratio between the two, right? My best hope is cooperation would still prevail over competition, and in the worst case, I believe it's the joint wish of both sides not to let it slide into confrontation.
Which leads me to a point that you have often made, and that is that Taiwan is the only issue that could drag China and America into a full-blown conflict. But you make a very interesting side point with that, Colonel Joe, and that is that you look at Russia and you look at Ukraine, and you've said that U.S. leaders have refused to enter into direct conflict with Russia over Ukraine, despite the gravity of the Russian transgression. Equally, they should consider war with China a red line that cannot be crossed. It seems to me this is a focus, a perspective on the Taiwan issue that is not widely disseminated. Can you talk a little bit about that? Because it seems like a very interesting issue.
Yes. You see, no matter what is going on in Ukraine, the United States has made it clear that they would not send troops, to fight Russians on the soil of Ukraine. So then, as a Chinese, I have to consider, okay, why is that? Why the United States would not send troops, to fight in Ukraine, while they would make it deliberately ambiguous about sending troops or not, to fight in Taiwan. That means there is still a possibility, that they might fight in Taiwan. So I have to compare the Chinese military with the Russian military. And then I get actually more confused because the Chinese military is the largest in the world, and our military expenditure is 3 times more than Russians. And we actually have the largest number of ships in the world. So why the United States would hesitate to fight against the Russians. Why not China? Yeah, I believe that is because, we have a small number of nuclear warheads. That seems to be the only reason. Yeah, I can conclude, because not only Russia has the largest number of nuclear warheads in the world, but from time to time they would make senior world stress about using them, right? And China's nuclear warheads, according to SIPRI, according to Pentagon, is only 600 by the end of last year, which is way smaller than that of the United States and Russia. So I would say that Chinese military, apart from nuclear weapons, is not at all inferior, to the Russian military. Yeah, and if the Chinese government conclude, okay, it is a shortage of nuclear weapons that actually has made the United States more provocative, then the solution is very easy for us. We just increase the number of nuclear warheads. We have the technical know-how, and if we need this kind of political determination, so we can just do it, right?
Absolutely. I understand what you're saying, and it's but in the statement that I heard you make in a interview, I forget with what station, you also mentioned the word transgression, right? You said U.S. leaders have refused to enter into direct conflict with Russia over Ukraine, despite the gravity of the Russian transgression. And that means that China looks at the Russian action very seriously. That, you call it a transgression. Talk a little bit about that, because then the American side and the Western side would say, well, if it's a transgression, then why is China enabling it by buying Russian oil? A little bit confusing on my side. So please, Bo, help out.
Right. Well, first of all, soon after Russia's invasion of Ukraine, the Chinese government has made it clear, that Russia should respect to a country's sovereignty. Saying like that simply demonstrates that we're just criticizing Russia for not respecting the sovereignty of Ukraine. If you want me to interpret it bluntly, it is just like that. But of course, China, because of its good relationship with Russia, probably just talk about this fact in a somewhat subtle way. So that is the Chinese way of expression. It does not mean that China believes that is all right. On the second issue, China is not supporting Russia at all, on this war, because apparently China has not provided Russia any military support, right? If China did, then it would not go unnoticed. Yeah. So what China is doing is to sell Russia what it sold to Russia before the war. The only difference is that the volume is become bigger because Russia is being sanctioned by the West. So it has to turn to China to buy more products from China. Then there are indeed some products that are dual use in nature, and that is the focal point. But when something is dual use in nature, you have to assume it is for civilian use first. For example, like oil gas. Nobody would consider oil gas a military product until it is put into the tank of a military truck. And then you could say it is a military item, but normally people would not consider oil and gas, military products. So that is what China is doing. And the Chinese economy in recent years, is not as good as it was before. So China also needs to export more. But even if China is selling Russia, through normal trading, China is not providing any military assistance to Russia in this war.
Got it. Let me take a moment to remind viewers that Polaris-Live, now starting its 5th year, is entirely viewer supported. We will, beginning from the last program, actually, viewers can now receive a professionally crafted one-page executive summary of each live YouTube episode on Substack, concise, accessible, and delivered straight to your inbox. Please subscribe to our new Substack channel. As you all know, Polaris-Live is freely available non-commercial channel sustained entirely by our readers. If you find value in our unique coverage of the US-China relationship and its global significance, please consider becoming a supporting annual subscriber by going to my website, Kashmeri, Kashmeri, Kashmeri.com. It's the model that helps keep us strong and commercially free. Thank you very much. Coming back now to our guest, Senior Colonel ZHOU Bo. Bo, President Xi Jinping recently reminded everyone that China and the US were close allies during the Second World War, and the partnership was front and center in defeating the war against fascism. He pointed out that it was time to recall that victory and what the two did together, and to forge a similar partnership to deal with today's issue. I'd just like you to talk about that and how you think this might be accomplished.
Well, I think President Xi is making such a call to remind the American what happened in the past. Yes, indeed, during the anti-Japanese war, the United States has helped China tremendously, as the Soviet Union did, because everybody in China knows how the Flying Tiger, the American pilots were actually, helping China and providing China a lot of assistance. I think this is a fact that right now the situation is becoming almost totally different. And so my president wants to make best of this opportunity, this event, to remind Americans what we did, hand in hand in the past. So this relationship doesn't have to be so competitive. This is what Joe Biden said. It's an extreme, competition. What I was once wondering was, well, if the competition is already extreme, how far is it away from a conflict, right? So this just makes people feeling nervous.
Yes, very much so. And but this, I thought, was a fairly significant initiative on the part of President Xi Jinping, because we've not recalled that very often. And it's well worth remembering, sadly, that over 20 million Chinese perished during that conflict. Do you have any specific ideas on how the two might execute on President Xi Jinping's initiative, Bo?
Well, I think I won't talk too much about the past. Actually, President Xi has made a number of global initiatives. Four of them altogether. But I want to talk about two. One is a Global Development Initiative. Another is Global Security Initiative. Well, people might consider they are just a big, grandiose concepts without details. It's not entirely like that. For example, if you talk about, if you look at China's, Global Development Initiative, there is already a Belt and Road Initiative, in which China has invested billions of dollars. So it is something quite substantive and grandiose, right? When we come to Global Security Initiative, what I wish to point out is that if you look at the PLA's operations overseas, you would find the PLA only doing humanitarian job. That is professionally called military operations other than war, be it peacekeeping, counter-piracy, or disaster relief. That is not accidental. It's a deliberate choice, because PLA just want to be focused on humanitarian aid to other people. And in so doing, the PLA would avoid using force or overuse of force. If you just do humanitarian work, that is understood by everyone, like peacekeeping and counter-piracy, right? But if you start to kill people with whatever excuses, eventually who remember all these excuses,
Yes.
right? The people simply died. Yeah, there are wars that Americans would criticize themselves, like the Afghan war, like Iraq wars, right? And now all those people who have already perished, yeah, what can we say about it? So my hope is that China right now is getting stronger, and the PLA is getting stronger.
Yes.
But even if PLA gets stronger, it will stick to some time-honored principles. Yeah, first of all, PLA should be extremely cautious in using force, right? Yeah, this is for our own reputation, and it also makes this world less dangerous. If China becomes another hegemon, and then this is but a repetition of what has happened in the world. So it's not something really, really good. So I hope China could create another miracle. By another miracle, I mean China has already created one miracle, that is peaceful rise to become the third largest economy in the world without firing a bullet. That is not found in human history. But from now, yeah, going down the road, we don't know what would lie ahead, but at least we have another target of becoming world-class military by 2049. So from now until 2049, yeah, I have a simple hope. Could PLA still exercise caution, even if its international responsibilities are become bigger, and even if China's overseas interests are becoming bigger? So I just cannot tell, but this is my hope, that China would continue exercise maximum caution in using force and do not seek spheres of influence. Yeah, the United States, yeah, would have been trying to police the whole world with spheres of influence here and there that are supported by allies. But if China doesn't have a global ambition, then you don't need allies. You don't need allies. So my argument is, because China today is already influential, so it doesn't need to have a spheres of influence. Most people confuse the two things. One is influence, another is sphere of influence. They are two different things. They are just two different things. China is already very, very influential to the extent that China doesn't need sphere of influence. In so doing, China would not repeat the mistakes the United States has already made. And this is cost effective, right? The alliance or even spheres of influence are difficult to build and are very difficult to maintain. Allies are not like sheep, they're like cats. It's difficult to herd cats, right?
That's a very interesting analogy. And obviously, it also ties into the rising influence and economic strength of the countries of the so-called global South, which makes it even more important for China and America to proceed along a path, as you've suggested. Now, Bo, we're starting to run into the end of our time now for this program. But I have a very important question to ask you. A few weeks from now, I will have the honor to chair the China Roundtable at the 76th Student Conference on World Affairs, which is annually held at the U.S. Military Academy at West Point.
Okay.
Now, and this is a really important conference that, as I say, has been held for 76 years at West Point, which brings together senior students from around the country and West Point cadets to talk about global issues. And these are amongst the brightest people that we have, and many of them will be future leaders of the country. And so if you were in my place, looking at the issues that we've just talked about, that you've just described, what would you tell them that you would like them to think about and think about doing to put this relationship in a much more stable and safer place?
Thank you so much. This is really a very complicated question. I often think about one issue, that is, has human being, become improved in human nature, right? Steven Pinker of Harvard University tend to think like that, because through his findings, the walls, found in the old days are becoming more, diminished. So that means probably human nature is also improving. And this is the time when people are more integrated economically, so you don't have to grab a lot of land. And this is also, a world in which nuclear weapons are absolutely horrible and destructive. So because of this, for those professional soldiers like me, like those in West Point, they should bear in mind that peace, can be earned. I think it is a joint wish, between Chinese and Americans not to come into a direct war, because nobody can actually calculate the consequences of a war between China and the United States. And what is good is that this seems to be a kind of a joint aspiration shared by the leadership of both sides. The question is, how can we achieve that? And for that, we need a lot of conversation. And this is exactly what I have written for Foreign Affairs magazine. During the Cold War, the slogan is trust but talk. That basically means, because I do not have enough trust in you, we need, to verify. Verify what the number of nuclear weapons on the two sides. So the Cold War slogan is trust but verify. But my slogan is trust but talk. Because China and the United States do not have equal number of nuclear warheads. So there's no need for us to verify the nuclear warheads. But we need to talk to one another more often. This is not actually what is happening now, because we don't have enough talks. So we should have a habit of talking to one another. And what should we talk about? Not only about nuclear weapons, but also in some new areas that were not found during the Cold War, such as AI, such as cyber, right? We could also talk about how we could do like United States and the Soviet Union to have a joint exploration of the outer space. Because during the Cold War, even between these two big enemies, there were still two areas of cooperation. One is joint efforts in eradicating smallpox. Another is joint peaceful use, of the outer space.
Well, those are mighty and effective words indeed. Now, Colonel Zhou, we have, alas, run out of time. I do want to shine a little bit of a spotlight on Polaris-Live based on what you recommended. In a small way, that's what we are trying to do, Bo, is provide timely, forthright conversations between China, America, and world leaders. And so it was a real pleasure to speak and to learn from you. So thank you so very much for taking the time.
Thank you, Sama, for having this good conversation. Thank you.
And thank you to our viewers from around the world. Please sign up to receive our program updates and alerts at my website, kashmeri.com. And a reminder that Polaris-Live will continue to be a freely available channel both on YouTube and Substack. If you value our unique programming, we'd appreciate your becoming a paid subscriber. Please join us again next Tuesday, 23rd September at 9:30 a.m. Eastern U.S. time, when we will focus on the view from Europe and the Middle East. Until then, goodbye.